Okay, in the last video of our Pride box set, I wanted to really give you a biblical example of humility, just so it's not about my experiences, although all the things I've shared with you up till now have come from Scripture. But I just felt like I really wanted to give you an example in Scripture. Now, obviously, I can talk about Jesus Christ, and we will do that in this passage, but I want to give you somebody else who maybe you might be able to find it easier to relate to than the Son of God himself. And so the person I want to tell you about today is Jonathan. Jonathan is in the book of 1 Samuel and is around in the life of David, and he is actually the son of the first king of Israel, King Saul, and he is Prince Jonathan. And let me tell you about Jonathan, because Jonathan is quite a man. He is well respected in his nation. He is well loved. He is a great warrior. He is a great leader. He's a great politician. He's got kindness. He's got great humility. And really, if you think about it, because Saul started kind of going a bit toxic towards the end of his kingly career, man, everyone was looking at Jonathan thinking, man, this guy is going to be a really good king, an amazing king. And actually, he has the right and is entitled to be the next king of Israel. And Israel at that moment is flourishing. It is a great time to be a king. And so this now is Jonathan. But he hears a story about a shepherd boy who had a prophet, Prophet Samuel, who really should be coming to anoint Jonathan. He's gone somewhere else and anointed a shepherd teenage boy and said he's going to be the next king. Now, I don't know about you, but Jonathan could have easily started to get frustrated and start maybe to plan and scheme so that make sure he still gets his birthright. It gets worse though, because then they hear that this teenage boy wanders up to the field and the battle zone with the Philistines, and he kills Goliath, the massive giant who has been threatening Israel, and he kills him with a stone. And now everybody is celebrating. You notice how it can be hard to celebrate others? Celebrating this guy David. And it gets worse. Saul calls David into the palace. His own father is now calling this young teenage boy who's supposed to be the next king and calling him into the palace, and you now have to meet him as Jonathan. Now, I don't know about you. I would find that situation hard. This guy is younger than me. He has less experience than me. It can be hard to celebrate him. I'm going to find flaws and criticize him. It can be very easy to get defensive and to try and not tarnish your reputation, but get vain and start to strive and story talk. Well, I've killed hundreds and thousands of Philistines. I once killed a group by myself. He could have easily gone down the pride route. But Jonathan, oh my man, Jonathan, does something truly significant and humble. And we read about it in 1 Samuel 18, verse 4. And it says this, "And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him, and he gave it to David. And then his armor, and even his sword and his bow, and then his belts." What I love is, if you read this passage of Scripture, in the Bible, it gives it a title of when Jonathan meets David type idea. But it's this moment is such a humble act, but that's really the only sentence dedicated to it in the Bible. I almost feel a bit sorry for Jonathan. He's done something so significant and so humble, but yet it only gets this tiny little bit in Scripture. And my friends, I want to show you how truly significant this moment is. He says he stripped him of his robe. He took off his robe and dressed David with it. Do you know what that's saying to David? He's saying, David, I no longer hold on to the right and entitlement I have to be king. I give that to you. David recognized the will of God in this situation and was humble enough to admit, I'm not the man. Come on, that is humble. I'm not the hero. I'm not the one they're going to sing songs about. I'm not the one that's going to have a lot of scripture dedicated to my life. I'm not going to be the one who is called the father of Jesus Christ. It's going to be this guy. And instead of fighting him, instead of criticizing, instead of being in opposition to him and having God having to oppose me because I'm proud, I'm going to be humble and allow God to give me more grace. So I dress him as the king. He then takes off his armor or his garment or his tunic, if depending on which translation you're reading. But what he's saying to David is, David, even though I'm a warrior and I'm actually older than you and I probably could kill you in a fight, and even though I'm just better at being a warrior, I'm actually going to dress you as a warrior and say you are the leader, the general of the army. This was his career. Right now, Jonathan, that was his job. He was meant to be the warrior guy. And he actually even gives over his career, his success, and says, David, I give it to you. What humility. I'm just astounded by Jonathan because it goes even deeper. He then gives him his sword. Now, guys, this is fascinating. He gives him his sword. This is so significant because at that time in Israel, they were under Philistine oppression, and they were not allowed to have blacksmiths building swords. You see, when you think about David and Goliath, the reason David had to choose stones is because the only other person that offered him a sword was Saul, but it was too big for him. And everybody else in the army didn't have swords and spears and shields, as you might imagine. The Bible actually tells us they had to sharpen their pitchforks. So these guys were just villagers at a fight. And so David picks up stones, but Jonathan gives him a sword. How come Jonathan had a sword? There were 2 swords in the land of Israel at that time. Saul had one, and his son, the rightful heir to the throne, had another. And he actually gave that to David. Guys, this is so humble. He's actually saying here, I'm going to be willing to be vulnerable, and it may even cost me my life because I now don't have a sword to defend myself with. I'm actually going to give you this sword, which is even more hilarious because David already had Goliath's sword. He took it when he killed him. So now David has 2. But Jonathan is humbling himself and saying, you are the man of the hour. I give you my sword. But you might say, but Liam, he still had a bow. But then he gives him his bow, which is amazing because Jonathan was known for his archery skills. In fact, the Bible talks about that Jonathan killed people with his bow while Saul killed people with his sword. For Jonathan, this wasn't just a bow. This was his reputation. This was his prized possession. And he freely gives it to a teenage boy and says, all that I am, I give to you, David. Guys, how incredible is that? He said to him with this moment, take my robe, my throne. Take my garment, my honor. Take my sword, my self-defense. Take my bow, my prized possession. You are welcome to it all. And what I love about Jonathan is the name means gift of God or God's gift. Just think about that. Jonathan's name is actually like, I'm a gift of God. He could easily have chosen to interpret that meaning to mean that I am a gift to Israel. How blessed and how lucky is Israel to have a prince and a king like me, Jonathan. He could have so easily interpreted that, but instead he interpreted it the other way, where he says, I'm actually here to be a gift for God. So I'm actually going to be a gift to others. And when I have a chance and an opportunity to lift them up and push them forward and hold open a door for them, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a gift to David. I'm not going to be a gift for him. I'm going to be a gift to him. I'm going to give him all of these gifts, and I'm going to give him my allegiance and my honor, and I'm going to submit myself to the will of God. Don't you love that? And what's funny is, you and I, we don't necessarily have to submit now to a David-type character, although I would encourage submission is great for us. We now have to submit and do the same thing with the Son of David. The Son of David in the Bible is known as Jesus Christ. You and I have to be willing and humble enough to go to Christ and say, you know what, Jesus? I give you my robe. All that was entitled to me, all of my life, I give to you. I'm going to give you my garment, my armor, my career, my purpose, my destiny. I'm going to give that all to you. I'm going to give you my sword. I'm going to be trusting in you, not on things of this world. I'm going to be vulnerable as I live in this world, and I'm going to trust you to provide and protect. I'm going to give you my bow. I'm going to give you my prized possessions. I'm going to give you my family, the things that I desire, the things that I want. God, I submit them all to your will, and I will play any part you ask me to play. Jonathan could have been king, but he remained at number 2. He could have gone for it. He could have schemed. He could have tried to kill David alongside Saul, but he decided that's not who I am. I'm a humble man of God, and so I submit to what it is that God has asked of me. My friends, I would encourage you, submit your life to Jesus like Jonathan did to David. And if you're thinking to me, well, Liam, why do we have to do that for Jesus? Because Jesus did it for you and me. In fact, Jesus, the Bible tells in Philippians chapter 2, that he himself had the rightful place in heaven. And he had that heavenly divine power. But the Bible tells us that he did not use it to his own advantage, just like Jonathan. And he actually submitted himself to the will of the Father and came down and was obedient to death, even death on the cross. And he made himself in the appearance of a servant, even though he's a king. And he did all of that to serve you and me. And then he actually gave his physical life so that you and I won't have to die. And so I encourage you guys, if he can give his physical life, time for you and me to give over our spiritual life. Jesus in this story is both Jonathan and David. He's like Jonathan to set an example for you and me. And he's like David to give us a place to focus our attention and to humble ourselves to. So I encourage every single person listening today, no matter how successful you are in the world, no matter if you are a prince among men, no matter if you are a successful warrior, and that people should be looking to you and thankful that you exist and that you are in this time of existence, I encourage you and implore you and urge you, humble yourself to the Son of David and give him your life, your career, your vulnerability, and your prized possessions. You want to be a humble person, you want to get rid of pride, start by bowing on your knees to the King of all kings. I hope this blesses and encourages you.